On this week's NFV SDN Reality Check, we look at some of the top news items from across the space, as well as speak with Cloudera on CSPs adopting Apache Hadoop open source technology. Well, thanks for joining us for this week's NFV SDN Reality Check. I'm your host, Dan Meyer, Editor-in-Chief here at RCR Wireless News. On today's show, we have an interview with Vijay Raja, who's the Solutions Marketing Manager at Cloudera, where we dig into the benefits of telecom operators using Apache Hadoop open source technology. But first, let's take a look at some of the top headlines from across the telecom-related NFV, SDN, cloud, and software space from the past week. ETSI recently concluded an industry workshop designed to align cloud and network-centric initiatives behind the move towards the deployment of NFV through automation. The event, which was hosted by CableLabs in Louisville, Colorado, was the work of ETSI's industry specification group for NFV and included attendance from standards development organizations and the open source community. ETSI claimed the meeting was the first attended by key standards organizations and open source communities to work on alignment of NFV activities. Participants included 3GPP, the Alliance for Telecommunications Industry Solutions, the Broadband Forum, International Telecommunications Union, Open Cloud Connect, Open Networking Forum, Open Daylight, Open Platform from NFV, and the TM Forum, among others. ETSI said the workshop resulted in a collaboration plan to achieve meaningful progress in addressing the challenges and opportunities identified in the workshop by the end of 2016. Participating organizations agreed to continue their work with the intent to keep in mind collaboration milestones and regular conference calls to monitor progress, and, when necessary, another workshop will be convened to progress alignment. Also this week, networking and security vendor Versa Networks said it recently received validation for a new platform designed to provide managed network and security services using VNFs and x86-based open hardware. Versa said the validation came from work with EMC testing interoperability of its Flex VNF software and EMC's NFV infrastructure platform, which Versa said creates an integrated virtualized consumer premise equipment and a box solution for deploying virtualized network and security functions in service provider points of presence or data centers. EMC's NFVI Manager software provides the product's hardware abstraction and orchestration, and its Scale.io provides storage. Versa provides the VNFs, with the company claiming it can support up to 250 end customer organizations with each VNF. The company said the platform supports various virtual infrastructure management deployments, including those from VMware and Red Hat. Now to our featured interview for the week with Cloudera, where we dig into Apache Hadoop open source technology and how it can benefit telecom operators. Let's take a look at the interview now. Well, thanks for joining us on this week's NFV SDN Reality Check. I'm your host, Dan Meyer, Editor-in-Chief here at RCR Wireless News. And today we are joined by Vijay Raja, who's the Solutions Marketing Manager at Cloudera, to talk about Hadoop, I think is the way to pronounce it, which for myself is going to be a big learning experience for me because it's a topic we've covered a little bit here on the show. But I don't think we've covered it nearly enough as we need to. So Vijay, thanks for joining us this week. We definitely appreciate it.
Thank you, Dan. Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Great. Well, let's start off with maybe, for those who don't know much about the company, maybe you want to give us a little overview of Cloudera, kind of what you guys do and how you participate in the telecom space.
Absolutely. So I'll start with giving you a quick overview of who Cloudera is and what we do. So Cloudera is actually the leader in next generation data management solutions. We provide the world's fastest, easiest, and most secure enterprise-grade Apache Hadoop platform, really to help organizations solve the most challenging business problems with data. Cloudera was actually founded in 2008, and we were the first company to commercialize Apache Hadoop. Doug Cutting, who co-created Hadoop, is Cloudera's chief architect and part of our management team. Again, we are pretty much market leaders when it comes to the enterprise Hadoop platform today, and we are one of the leading contributors to the Apache Hadoop open source community as well. Now, if you talk about growth, we continue to be in a rapid growth trajectory, as you can imagine, in the Hadoop and big data space. We have already grown to more than 1,000 employees all over the globe. We have presence across North America, Europe, and APAC, and we continue to kind of grow by the day recently. So in terms of partnerships, I think we have a very, very solid and very healthy and very robust partner ecosystem that we work with. We have about close to 1,900 partners that we work with today, and including everything from infrastructure solution partners, business intelligence solutions, ISVs, key SIs, and even cloud vendors. So we partner with a lot of these different players, and we go to customers together sometimes just to implement end-to-end solutions with some of these partners. Last but not least, in terms of customers, Cloudera today has customers in almost every key vertical you can think of. So we have presence in financial services, insurance, telco is a big one. We have presence in healthcare, retail, and also public sector and technology services as well. So again, kind of good presence across all of the verticals. When it comes to telco specifically, we support some of the leading tier 1, tier 2 service providers across the globe. And it's actually one of the key verticals that we focus on, and we see a lot of growth and a lot of momentum happening in the communications domain with respect to Hadoop.
Very good, very good. Well, maybe let's start off with, like I said at the beginning there. I mean, I've written a little bit about Hadoop, but I obviously my expertise is not too deep on it. So maybe if you can give us, I guess, an overview of kind of what the technology is and how it's, I guess, how it's used. I know, obviously, it's a part of big data, obviously, but how it's being used by enterprises and by companies, and maybe even by the telecom industry as well. Maybe some overview on that would be good too.
Absolutely. So Hadoop is basically a data management platform, right? So one of the key challenges that telcos and enterprises have today, specifically telcos have today, is that they have access to lots of data, and the other key aspect being that the data is actually siloed, right? They have data across these multiple different silos spread across the organization. So one of the challenges, this is one of the key challenges that telcos deal with today. So what Hadoop can really help you is actually bring together all of these diverse data sources into one single data point, right? Okay. So how can you have like an enterprise data hub where you can actually bring these data from all of these diverse data sources, and you can then combine this data, process this data, serve this data in a number of different fashions, and really use it for a diverse set of use cases, right? Okay. So just to give you some example, so again, there are a number of hundreds of different use cases that telcos are currently using Hadoop today. But what we have seen is, based on working with customers, if you look at all the use cases, you can typically bundle them into 4 key big buckets or 4 key big domains. Okay. So the first one is really using Hadoop to improve customer experience. So customer experience management is kind of the first big domain that Hadoop is really extensively used for. And what CSPs are trying to do is they're trying to utilize Hadoop and big data analytics solutions to really stitch together a true 360-degree view of their customers. Now that's 360-degree view across channels, across products, across devices, across their lines of businesses, right? So they're trying to build this 360-degree view so that they can offer more personalized services. They can offer more targeted campaigns and programs for customers, and really improve the overall customer experience, right? So that's one aspect of how they're using Hadoop for improving customer experience. The other aspect is also, they're starting to use Hadoop for delivering, proactive customer care. So how do you reach out to customers before they face significant issues, try and resolve those issues, and really provide a wow moment of experience for the customers, right? So proactive customer experience is another big area within customer experience management that we are seeing Hadoop and big data analytics pick up. And last but not the least is another big area within improving customer experience would be predictive churn analytics. Right. So again, how do you bring together these diverse data sources across CRM, customer care, and even social media streams? How do you bring this all together in order to really identify at-risk customers, right? Customers who have propensity to churn. How do you reach out to them proactively and then and kind of try and retain them with targeted retention programs, or basically try and retain them with targeted retention programs? So predictive churn analytics is also a big piece within this customer experience bucket that we talked about, right? So all of these these 3 use cases, high-level use cases, all fall within the customer experience bucket. The other key area where we are seeing a lot of momentum from a telco perspective is network management, network analytics. Okay. Right? So again, network is a really costly resource when it comes to telcos, right? Yeah. Pumping in about 20% of the revenues every year into CapEx, and the bulk of that really goes into managing your network, maintaining your network, and really expanding and expanding your network, right? So telcos are starting to use Hadoop and big data analytics solutions to effectively monitor, manage, and build predictive capacity models for their network. They are also using it for prioritizing and planning network expansion decisions, specifically with respect to the network, right? So what they have is you have Hadoop, and you also have some solutions that sit on top of Hadoop, by which telcos can actually do real-time capacity heat maps, right? You continuously monitor the network performance. How is the network performing? Where do we need to optimize capacity so that we can provide the right customer experience? So network management and optimization is another huge area that telcos are starting to utilize Hadoop for. Okay.
Got it.
So we talked about customer experience management. We talked about network management. And the third big piece that we are seeing where there is considerable action is really around how they're using Hadoop to really improve core telco operations. Okay. So what I mean by core telco operations is things like how do I minimize revenue leakage? How can I use Hadoop and data analysts to really tackle fraud in real time, right? Managing network and cybersecurity. Those are all big use cases that we are starting to see today. So one of our customers, for example, they are actually using Hadoop to do real-time fraud analytics solutions by which they can tackle roaming fraud, subscription fraud, premium rate service fraud in real time using Hadoop and big data analytics. So that's another huge area there where we see some actions within service providers.
Got it. Okay. It sounds like this is basically almost like an aggregator, basically of these big data streams that are coming in. And obviously, operators, like you're saying, and enterprises, they've got all this huge amounts of data out there, and they're all kind of bringing it all together to kind of make some actionable intelligence on this, or to actually do something with this. Would it be safe to say that Hadoop is kind of the aggregator of all this, so someone somewhere in the telecom operator can actually make a decision, or some sort of automated process can make a decision on what's coming in and actually make something that's actionable for the operator?
Absolutely. So it's not just aggregation. You ingest all this data. How do you combine different data sets? How do you drive some compelling analytics out of this data, right? That's really where Hadoop excels in. So you can ingest all this data. You can ingest data from sensors in real time. You can combine that with your billing, customer care, CRM data, and you can actually build compelling analytics out of all of this data, right? Again, that's what we're really talking about when it comes to telcos. Is these guys have access to lots of data. Yeah. The real question is how do you really make some meaningful business insights out of all of this data, right? And that's really where Hadoop comes into picture. And it's interesting you mentioned that, because so we talked about three diverse buckets of use cases, right? We talked about customer experience, we talked about network management, we talked about internal operations enablement. But another key area, another key bucket that we're seeing starting to emerge is this whole area called data monetization. Yeah. Right? Because again, to your point earlier, telcos have access to all of this data. What they're trying to do now is they're starting to mine, model, and aggregate and anonymize all of these data sets to really create powerful statistics that can be of value to other verticals. So folks like retail services or financial services or advertising companies are really trying to look at some of the data stats that CSPs can provide, or communication service providers can provide them. So I can give you an example. For example, one of the key use cases that we have seen in the data monetization space is communication service providers providing footfall analytics to retail vendors. Mm-hmm. Right? So for example, retail chains want to know who's visiting their stores, what type of customers are visiting their stores, how are they actually navigating within the store, right? Where do they have most traffic? Where do they don't have much traffic, right? What customers are visiting my store versus what customers are visiting my competitive stores. Mm-hmm. Right? So there's a lot of interesting analytics that CSPs are able to provide. And by the way, this is actually being done today at leading service providers in Europe and in North America. So that's one example. They're also utilizing data monetization services to assist cities understand traffic patterns and bottlenecks, right? Because all of these traffic stations and cars typically emit data. They have cell phones, and you basically can provide a good overview of how the traffic patterns work and how the bottlenecks work. Mm-hmm. They're also helping logistics companies fine-tune delivery processes and even aiding advertising companies really give them a better view of which customers are visiting where and when, and that's also a key enabler for this whole bucket called data monetization services. That's also emerging fast, and it's actually another new kind of a revenue value chain for telcos that they're trying to explore.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. Obviously, all these topics you brought up and all these use cases, from just covering the telecom space over the past, few years or 15 years or whatever. These are all topics that operators have been grappling with for years and years. So,
Exactly.
This is really something that kind of is bringing all that to light. And again, the last thing you mentioned, the monetization aspect of it, that's obviously, the end game for all these guys is somehow, not just analyze this information, but actually if they can make something actionable and make money off of it. That's an extra bonus right there for everybody involved. That's a big part of this.
Absolutely, yeah. And we're starting to see more of the data monetization come up in some of the decisions, more in North America and Europe. Yep. We have not seen much data monetization stories in APAC, but I'm guessing that's going to come pretty soon as well.
Sure. But I guess as you look at how the telecom market is adopting this, like you said, a lot of operators are already using this in their operations now. Are you seeing a pretty good broad adoption rate of this, or is it mostly right now still maybe the larger operators who might have perhaps the resources in place to really maybe take advantage of this? What's been, I guess, the adoption chart so far in terms of kind of using Hadoop in these operations themselves?
Sure. So I would say overall, we've seen a very solid and very healthy adoption of Hadoop and big data analytics solutions overall within telcos, primarily within tier 1, tier 2 telcos around North America, Europe, and much more in APAC now. There's a lot more action in APAC now than what was 2 years before. Again, part of the fact is, these guys have access to unprecedented amounts of data, right?
Yeah.
Customer profiles, device data, network data, usage patterns, location data, and clickstream data, so on and so forth. So the question really is, how can CSPs, leverage all of this special data that they have and really turn something into more meaningful? And that's what is really driving the adoption of big data and Hadoop today within service providers. Again, as I said, there's a lot of action happening in North America and Europe. But I think just because the volumes of data coming out of APAC, I think we're starting to see a lot more action from tier 1, tier 2 service providers in APAC as well, starting to jump on, starting to utilize Hadoop in very different and very innovative ways that we're starting to see now.
It makes sense. Now, some of our viewers here might be at a telecom operator who's just getting interested in this, or just maybe learning about it for the first time. What's a good way, or how are operators, I guess, getting started in terms of using Hadoop in their operations? Obviously, they've got systems in place already. They're already monitoring customer experience, monitoring a lot of analytics, network operations. I guess, if they're looking to kind of, bring all this stuff together into maybe an easier to use kind of a picture, I guess, how are they looking, or how could they start deploying Hadoop into the system? What would be a recommendation from you, and how they actually can get started with this?
Sure. So that's a very interesting question, Dan, because we have seen customers and telcos start at really different stages on their data management value chain when it comes to utilizing Hadoop, right? Again, what we're seeing is they're starting to utilize Hadoop for a number of different use cases that we talked about earlier. Yeah. But the way where they start is kind of interesting, because some of them really start using Hadoop as an operational efficiency tool, right? So a lot of times we see customers start at the very basic, which is use Hadoop as an active archive mechanism or an operational data store, where you just want to store a lot of data. You want to store data for the next 9 years, in a very cost-effective and a very, very easy and a very secure fashion. Right? So customers sometimes start there because that's like a very, very easy and a very compelling use case to get started with.
Sure.
And that's okay. That's a good point to start. But then what we see is that once customers start doing that, then they're like, hey, I have this huge data store with all of this data together, customer data, network data, CRM data, and location data, all of this together. I can actually start utilizing that to bring out some compelling use cases and compelling analytics, right? So this sometimes start there, and then what we have seen is then they navigate to other bigger, broader, and more business-centric use cases. And telcos do a lot of that today. So just to give you some perspectives, so one of our clients in Asia, again, they're talking about huge data growth. They're talking about 100% data growth year over year, right? So, tremendous data. So, they adopted Cloudera primarily. Their first use case basically was to just as an operational data store, just as an active archive mechanism to really store all of their CDRs and their XDRs, right? Mm-hmm. They want to keep data for longer data retention at a much cost-effective manner, right? In a more cost-effective manner. That was really their first use case. But then once they did that, and then they got a very great ROI out of that project. And then they started realizing, we should probably start utilizing this data to really solve some of our business problems, right? Mm-hmm. And then they started implementing a series of compelling use cases, primarily around customer 360 and customer management. Things like predictive churn analytics. They did social churn, rotational churn, customer lifetime value analytics, and also something called a proactive dashboard. So that was a very interesting one, because what they did was they took this, the Hadoop platform, and they built kind of an analytics solution on top of it, what it did was it monitored, and for all of your high value customers, it monitored their network performance or quality of service. Mm-hmm. Right? Mm-hmm. The moment when one of your high value customers' network quality of service fell below a certain threshold, it actually triggered an alert that went both to your network teams as well as to your customer care teams, right? So that the network teams can actually get right on top of it and say, hey, yeah, this customer, so-and-so customers are having an issue, let's try to solve that issue, right? Simultaneously, you have customer care teams who is actually proactively contacting the customer, letting them know that, hey, Mr. Customer, we know there's an issue going on with the network. We are on it, we are on top of it, we'll get it resolved as soon as possible. Mm-hmm. By the way, depending on the value of that customer, you would say, hey, the next movie download is on us, right? Mm-hmm. So that was a fantastic way, again, great examples of how, customers started with, very data-centric or very technology-centric use case and really moved up the value chain in a very progressive fashion and start to deliver more compelling, more business-oriented, more customer-centric use cases that can deliver real-time value. Right?
Makes sense, yeah.
So again, that is one example. I can give another very interesting journey that might be helpful for a lot of the folks here is what BT did with Hadoop, right? Okay. So BT was one of our customers, and when BT started, their first use case for using Cloudera was an ETL optimization use case. So they just wanted to optimize their ETL process, right? Mm-hmm. And again, this was primarily for their business customers, for customer data. And the problem BT had was that their business customer data were separated across 12 different databases, right? So they had this customer data spread across 12 different databases, right? And so every night they used to run this massive ETL job to compare, contrast, and reconcile all this data. Yeah. So all of these systems are in sync and are up to date, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that batch process kind of worked well up to a certain point. Mm-hmm. But as the data started growing, as the volume started growing, gradually that ETL window started to expand, and finally it happened that it actually took them 24 hours to process 24 hours worth of data. So it was just getting out of hand, right? So it was basically a data velocity problem that BT was dealing with. Yeah. Right? So then they decided, Hadoop is the best answer to the solution, to this data velocity problem. So they actually installed Cloudera, they actually installed Hadoop to kind of resolve this issue. And I would say they actually had they actually went from PowerPoint to production, I would say, in less than 9 months. Mm-hmm. That was a very good journey that they had. And by the end of it, what they could do was that, instead of having 24 hours processing the data, they were able to increase their data velocity by 15x, which means that, you could process 5 times more data than before in 1/3 of the time. Mm-hmm. Right? So basically, they moved all of the different databases into Hadoop. They moved all the ETL processing into Hadoop, thereby freeing up their data warehouse to do what it was supposed to do. Right, mm-hmm. That significantly cut out the time required and the performance required from all of this processing, right? And so they were able to actually process 5 times the data in 1/3 of the time. So that's a great use case by which they started with, and they were thrilled about it, and they had a very compelling ROI again from that project. And then they thought, what? Hey, Hadoop could do this. Let's see what else can we do with Hadoop. Mm-hmm. What else use case that can we utilize Hadoop for? And one of the things that they're currently using Hadoop for is really rolling out their high-speed internet services in UK.
Mm-hmm.
So what they have is, so whether a subscriber can get high-speed internet is determined by, how good the copper is, how long the copper is, how many joints does the copper have, and you got to mix in a whole lot of test data, operational data, and a whole lot of data sets that needs to be joined together to make that correlation, right?
Mm-hmm.
And today they're actually using Hadoop to do that and really roll out high-speed internet services within UK. And they're also using Hadoop to really determine when is an ideal time to really send in the crew to deploy the fiber, so that they can actually minimize the truck rolls. So they graduated from using Hadoop as a very IT-centric, ETL type of use case.
Mm-hmm.
They went to actually using it for rolling out internet, high-speed internet within UK. Now, you'll be surprised, they're actually using Hadoop to do even more compelling use cases, including, one use case around IoT. So they're actually doing a smart parking solution. They've actually partnered with Milton Keynes County in UK, and they're deploying a smart parking solution for Milton Keynes County, basically to improve the efficiency of their parking spaces there. So what they did was they actually had sensors deployed on each of the parking lots, right? And what they did was, and then the sensors continually emit data around, hey, if this parking lot is occupied or is vacant, right? And this data then goes through the BT network and it goes into the Hadoop the Cloudera Hadoop platform sitting in the BT data center. And what's really cool is, visitors who are visiting can actually use a smartphone app to see which is the nearest parking spot, and the app actually guides you to the nearest parking lot near to where you are, using it's all based on the sensor data that fed into Hadoop. So, again, really interesting use cases and really interesting journey that a company like BT had, starting from a very data-centric use case to a more business-centric, IoT-driven use cases today.
Yeah. Obviously, it seems like as their comfort level gets more and more with the product, they different areas to use it in, and obviously they can see different efficiencies there too. So that makes sense. Yeah. Well, maybe as a final, maybe wrap up kind of question on this, and obviously it's a topic we could definitely, I know I need to discuss probably a couple more hours, but to get more insight into it. But I guess maybe as a wrap up for this conversation, at least, as you look ahead, what are some of the challenges that you see, at least for the telecom space, for, I guess, towards further adoption of Hadoop out there? Obviously it does seem like operators are seeing some efficiencies out there, but there's probably still some ways that maybe some challenges that you maybe might see out there in terms of further adoption of this.
Absolutely. So based on customer discussions and based on dealing with, interacting with customers, there are a couple of challenges that typically come out and that can affect kind of the adoption of Hadoop and adoption of big data in general within telcos and enterprises. The number one problem which we usually hear about is usually things around skill resources, right?
Okay.
Access to skill resources or professionals who are proficient in Hadoop, who are proficient in big data, who have background in data science. That's currently one of the limitations for clients today, right? Yeah. What we've done is Cloudera now, we're offering a comprehensive set of training programs or services that clients can utilize to really get their staff up to speed on Hadoop and big data. So we have certification programs, and we have already trained about 35,000 professionals on Hadoop, including everything from Hadoop development in Hadoop, deployment administration, and also on data science, right? So you have public and private trainings that clients are starting to utilize, and telcos especially are starting to utilize to really get their staff up to speed on Hadoop and get them, more engaged in Hadoop and data science initiatives. So that's number one. I would say the other big challenge that, and again, this is something that more of a challenge, something that telcos need to think about, is really about data security and customer privacy issues, right? This is especially true for CSPs with all of this data that they have. How do you ensure complete data security? How do you maintain customer privacy, right? How do you ensure that the sensitive customer information is really protected? So having the most secure and most complete Hadoop platform, that's important. But I think this becomes more so critical when you talk about things like data monetization services that we talked about, right? When you're actually serving data to external entities such as vertical, other verticals, right? And I think the key here for CSPs or communication service providers is really to effectively aggregate, anonymize the customer data sets, so that really the customer privacy and sensitive information about individual customers is really not compromised, right?
Mm-hmm.
They actually need to aggregate different types of customer data. They need to anonymize that data and still provide compelling analytics so that they're not compromising on individual customer privacy and individual customers' sensitive information. So I think that's going to be a critical success factor for communication service providers, especially when it comes to some of the data monetization and some of the IoT use cases going forward.
Makes sense. And I mean, I guess are those things in place? I'm guessing from you as a point of view as a vendor, I'm guessing you guys have the stuff in the processes in place to kind of really answer those questions for operators that they might have going forward, I'm guessing.
Absolutely. So if we have comprehensive security, security processes as well as mechanisms within the platform that service providers are utilizing extensively today, actually, especially telcos, because data security is huge within big data. And, of course, the Hadoop platform definitely lets you manage data security, especially the Cloudera platform will let you, manage data security in a very, very granular fashion and give data security across all 4 levels of the system.
Very interesting. Well, I guess maybe one final question. I know I already said a final question, but I guess, on the show here, we do a lot. We kind of looking at the world of virtualization, and obviously telecom space, NFV and SDN are really big hot topics right now. I guess what's the connection, if there is one, between perhaps NFV, SDN, kind of move towards virtualization and Hadoop? And are you seeing a lot of kind of similarities there, or is one driving the other? Or what's maybe some connection there?
Absolutely. So I think it really relates well into the network optimized network management kind of scenario, the bucket that we talked about.
Yep.
So basically at the end of the day, what virtualization will essentially drive is you're going to move most of your processing from the hardware to the software, right? And what that means is more data, right? So again, what that means is how can you effectively store that data? How can you effectively manage that data? How can you effectively get insights into all of that network data that's going to be virtualized, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think so that's going to be I think that's going to be another huge area or huge enabler for why telcos will start to adopt Hadoop and big data analytics, specifically when it comes to the NFV and the SDN domain.
Makes sense. Yeah, I mean, I know all the operators I've talked to, some analysts as well. I mean, that's been one of their concerns is the fact that this move towards virtualization is generating so much more software data traffic out there for these operators. I mean, just the software information. And so, yeah, I mean, how do you then kind of deal with all of that new information coming in? I mean, they're used to dealing with stuff in the legacy systems already, and that's been a challenge too. But now you've got these new streams coming in from these new software platforms out there, and yeah, that's a whole different kind of worms for these guys. So yeah, it seems like some way to kind of manage it all is ideal and kind of allow them to take advantage of what they're putting out there. So
and especially with new, when especially as service providers are getting more into IoT type services, like connected homes and connected cars. You can imagine the amount of data that's going to be generated from all these sensors, from all the cars, from all the connected homes, right? So again, service providers need to have a comprehensive big data strategy around how they're going to manage, how they're going to store this data, how they're going to manage this data, and most importantly, how they're going to actually convert all of this data into compelling business insights. I think that's really what's going to be the compelling differentiators for telcos going forward.
Makes sense. Well, very interesting. Well, Vijay, again, we definitely appreciate the great insight on this today. Like I said, for me, it's a big learning experience to me, so I definitely appreciate you just bringing me along with that as well. But obviously, this is a subject that I'm guessing we're going to cover a lot more here on the show as well. But definitely appreciate the time and information on this today. Thanks so much for that.
Thank you, Dan. Great to be here, and thanks for having me.
All right, and hopefully we'll talk again soon on topic. But again, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it. Well, thanks for joining us on this week's NFV SDN Reality Check. Make sure to check us out again next week when we are scheduled to speak with Yukamon about visibility fabric needed for NFV deployments. Thanks for watching.
NFV SDN Reality Check with Dan Meyer is a production of RCR TV. To suggest show topics or to reach Dan, you can find him on email, dmeyer@rcrwireless.com, and on Twitter @Meyer_Dan. For more Dan, news on NFV SDN and everything wireless, find your way over to rcrwireless.com.